Hello, today we will uncover one of the darkest pages in Germany's criminal history. A horrifying case where even the mere mention of the perpetrator's name sends chills down people's spines. Joakim Crow, the butcher of Thu region, haunted Germany for over 2 decades. From 1955 to 1976, he lurked in the shadows, spreading terror through a series of brutal murders. It wasn't until 1976, during a police operation, that this human-disguised monster was finally captured. Joakim Crow confessed to all his heinous crimes over 21 years, describing in detail how he killed and even consumed his victims, most of whom were young women, and his reason for such barbaric acts. Unbelievable, he claimed it was to save money. According to his confession, post-war inflation had driven meat prices sky high, making human flesh a grotesque alternative. This chilling justification shocked the public, turning his case into one of Germany's most infamous criminal records. But what twisted Joakim Crow into such a monster? To find the answer, we must go back to his childhood. Joakim Crow was born on April 17, 1933, in Hindenburg, Germany, into a poor working-class family. That year also marked Adolf Hitler's rise to power, ushering in a dark era of fascism, militarism, and dictatorship. Crow's childhood unfolded amidst this societal turmoil. His father, a coal miner, was the sole breadwinner, while his mother stayed home to care for their 9 children. Joakim was the 6th child in this large, impoverished family, deprived not only of material needs, but also of emotional warmth. At age 6, World War II erupted, shattering their already fragile life. His father was drafted into the army and vanished without a trace. Some believed he was captured by Soviet forces. Others said he died in battle. Regardless, the family lost its only provider. Crow's mother struggled to raise 9 children alone, eventually relocating the family to North Westphalen in Western Germany. At that time, Germany was divided into Allied-controlled zones, its economy devastated by war. Poverty was widespread, with millions left homeless and starving. Like many post-war German families, the Crows lived in constant hardship. Their livelihood depended on the meager wages his mother earned from odd jobs. In such deprivation, both materially and emotionally, Crow's childhood was marked by hunger, malnutrition, and chronic illness, shaping his frail and troubled youth. His mental development was noticeably slower than his peers, making him an easy target for bullying at school. His academic performance declined severely, while pressure from his own family also weighed heavily on him. As the 6th child, Joakim Crow was overlooked and dismissed by his siblings. His mother, busy working to support the family, had no time to care for her children. These harsh experiences slowly shaped Crow's withdrawn and distant personality. From a young age, Crow displayed worrying behaviors. He often struggled with nighttime accidents and mistreated small animals. In criminal psychology, such patterns bedwetting, harming animals, and setting fires are known as the McDonald triad, early indicators of potential behavioral disorders. These signs in Crow's childhood hinted at the troubled path his life would eventually follow. At 15, after failing multiple school years, Crow was forced to leave school. He began taking on various low-paying jobs, from farm labor to factory work. During his time on the farm, he frequently witnessed livestock being processed. For most people, these were routine tasks, but for Crow, they triggered unusual feelings of fascination. He later admitted that such scenes gave him a strange sense of satisfaction. As he grew older, Crow attempted to build a normal relationship with a woman, but the relationship soon ended. He confessed feeling anxious and lacking confidence, especially in private moments. He struggled with emotional connection and often felt discomfort, which eventually led to the breakup. This experience left him with a disturbing conclusion. He believed he needed to seek out people who would never judge his shortcomings. For years, Crow lived on the margins of society, unable to form meaningful bonds. This isolated way of life slowly distorted his mind. Meanwhile, post-war Germany was still reeling from the emotional and moral scars of conflict. Widespread loss, economic hardship, and social instability left many feeling hopeless and disconnected. The fragile social order created an environment where individuals like Crow became even more isolated. Such a setting, combined with Crow's inner struggles and the absence of support, likely contributed to the development of his later extreme behaviors. In 1955, his mother passed away. That same year, at age 22, Crow was involved in his first violent incident. Many believe her death caused the collapse of his last emotional restraint, as she had been the only figure of authority and remaining family bond in his life. The loss of his mother not only meant the disappearance of his last emotional bond, but also severed his final connection to society. All of this deepened Crow's dark thoughts, pushing him to reveal his true nature and begin committing serious crimes. To satisfy his twisted desires, on May 8, 1955, Crow happened to meet a 19-year-old girl from Essen who had run away from home. At the village of Waldstadt, near Allain, he was drawn to the young blonde and initiated a conversation, inviting her for a walk in the nearby forest. Trusting him, she agreed. The two strolled along a forest path, but after about 200 meters, Crow suddenly acted inappropriately, startling the girl. She resisted and scolded him loudly, which enraged Crow. Blinded by anger, he pulled out a sharp knife and attacked, stabbing her neck for times until she collapsed. After the assault, Crow crossed another line, treating the victim's body with shocking cruelty, much like his past encounters with animals. He then dragged her body into the roadside bushes, covering it with branches to hide the evidence. It wasn't until 5 days later that a passerby discovered the victim and alerted the police. The scene was so gruesome that investigators initially believed multiple perpetrators were involved. This misjudgment caused the investigation to go off track, wasting valuable time in solving the case. Meanwhile, Crow felt a disturbing sense of satisfaction, as if he had unlocked a forbidden thrill that urged him to continue his crimes. In the early 1960s, Crow moved to Duisburg. He started with a janitorial job at a local company, later joining the Thyssen Corporation. He rented an apartment at 20 Verfreen Street in Duisburg's Law District. To his colleagues, Crow seemed ordinary but somewhat odd, quiet, reserved, and socially detached. Yet, behind this unassuming facade, he would go on to commit 12 shocking crimes in the surrounding areas over the next 20 years. On June 16, 1959, Crow encountered Clara Freider, a 24-year-old woman by the roadside near Die Vision Dotzel. He approached Clara and tried to grab her arm, but she firmly rejected him. Feeling humiliated, Crow reacted violently, striking her head. A fierce struggle ensued, with both tumbling onto the grass. In the scuffle, Crow overpowered Clara, ending her life through force. The following day, 5 young cyclists discovered Clara's body by the roadside. Investigators noted unusual marks on the body, including clear signs of tampering with certain areas. Later, Crow admitted that seeing Clara's delicate form had triggered a dark impulse within him, leading to an unspeakable act, crossing into the realm of cannibalism for the first time. He took the pieces of meat he had cut and brought them home, cooking them himself. The remaining portions were stored in his refrigerator. Crow even experimented with different cooking methods, trying to discover the best taste. From that moment on, he seemed to accept this dark practice, believing it satisfied both his personal urges and saved him money. A twisted notion of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Getting away with his first 2 crimes emboldened Crow. He became more reckless, actively searching for his next targets. He often chose women walking alone, as they were easier to overpower. From 1959 to 1962, Crow continued to use similar methods to attack for more young victims. On May 26, 1959, Manu Nanos, a 16-year-old girl, became his next victim. While in a city park in Essen, she was assaulted and strangled by Crow. He then cut meat from her body and brought it home. On April 23, 1962, a 13-year-old girl named Petragus was tragically attacked while playing alone in a forest near Duisburg. Her body was later discovered in roadside bushes, bearing severe injuries. She had been strangled with her own scarf. Investigators noted the disturbing state of her remains. In this case, police mistakenly arrested a man named Werner Kruger, who had a prior criminal record. He was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment. It wasn't until 6 years later that Kruger was released after evidence proved his innocence. That same year, on June 4th, Monika Teufel, a 12-year-old schoolgirl from Oberhausen, disappeared on her way to school. Her family immediately contacted the authorities. After a week of searching, police used helicopters and eventually found her body in a nearby forest. Crow later confessed that he had been following Monika and lured her into a barley field where he committed the crime. He repeated the same horrific acts, bringing portions back home. Initially, police arrested Werner Kruger again due to a witness claim, but lacking solid evidence. They had to release him. Despite his release, Kruger faced public backlash. His wife divorced him, neighbors shunned him, and local stores refused service. Crushed by overwhelming pressure, Kruger tragically ended his life in October 1962. 3 months later, on January 5th, Barbara Bruder, a 12-year-old girl from Bauer, was reported missing on her way to school. Crow later admitted to being responsible, but since Barbara's body was never found, he wasn't formally charged in this case. During these years, a series of attacks shocked Duisburg. Several innocent people were wrongfully accused while the real culprit, Joakim Crow, remained unnoticed. Neither the police nor his neighbors suspected him. On October 22, 1965, Crow committed another crime, targeting Hans Schmidt, his only known male victim. That night, Crow saw Hans and his fiancée, Miriam, sharing a moment in a secluded car. Pretending to ask for help, Crow lured Hans out of the vehicle and fatally stabbed him. His initial plan was to attack Miriam next, but Miriam was fortunate to escape. In a panic, she jumped into the driver's seat, sped the car straight at Crow, and managed to flee. This was the only failed attempt in Crow's long history of crimes. Although Miriam had seen his face clearly, her description of this ordinary-looking man provided little useful information to the police. Crow continued his attacks, becoming bolder over time. From 1966 to 1969, he was responsible for 5 more assaults, targeting women with no specific pattern. Unlike many other serial offenders, Crow's victims varied greatly in age and appearance, from a 5-year-old girl to a 60-year-old woman. On June 13, 1966, Darlene, a 20-year-old woman, was targeted after spending the day with her boyfriend, Adolf Seiler, at a local park. While walking home, she encountered Crow, who engaged her in conversation before ambushing her. He strangled Darlene with his right arm and dragged her into the bushes. Her body was found 2 days later in a compromised state. Although Adolf Seiler was initially suspected and questioned, lack of evidence led to his release. Sadly, unable to endure public scrutiny, Adolf took his own life later that year. On December 22nd, that same year, Ilona Hess, a young girl, was found in a ditch near Essen. Crow had lured her onto a bus and taken her to a remote forest, where he committed the crime. He later admitted to pushing her into the ditch, driven by a twisted curiosity to see if she would drown. On June 22, 1967, Gabrielle Buter, a 10-year-old girl, was attacked on a rural road north of Bochum. Crow attempted to lure her into a grassy field, but when she tried to run, he grabbed her. Fortunately, a shift change alarm from a nearby coal mine startled him, and miners returning home intervened in time, saving the girl. However, Gabrielle's family chose not to report the incident immediately, fearing for her reputation. It wasn't until 9 years later, after Crow's arrest, that they came forward. On May 12, 1969, Maria Hess, aged 61, was attacked by Crow near Hertenwan. After a train ride from Duisburg, Crow encountered Maria during her walk. When she rejected his advances, he assaulted her and ended her life in a secluded area. A year later, on May 21st, young Jutta, a 13-year-old girl, was followed by Crow on her way home from the train station. As she passed through a quiet path, he attacked her. On August 8, 1976, Karen Topher, a 10-year-old girl from Viersen, was tragically killed while walking to school. Due to the lack of a clear pattern and the widespread locations of the crimes, Duisburg police failed to connect these 13 incidents. Moreover, Crow didn't always engage in his most extreme behaviors with every victim. He later admitted that he only selected certain parts of his victims, preferring soft, fresh cuts. Crow had an ordinary appearance and kept to himself, which made him less likely to be suspected. According to neighbors and acquaintances, he was quiet, shy, and lived a reclusive life. At that time, Germany was in a period of reconstruction. Social order was still fragile, and crimes occurred, frequently stretching police resources thin. Because of these factors, Crow managed to hide in plain sight for over 20 years, evading capture while living unnoticed among the community. His dark journey finally came to an end in 1976. In July of that year, a 4-year-old girl named Marion Cater went missing while playing near her home in Duisburg. A large-scale search was launched, but no leads were found. However, a critical breakthrough came from Crow's own apartment building in the Law District. Several days after the disappearance, a neighbor, Frank Joseph Stam, noticed the shared restroom was clogged. Crow had warned him not to use it, claiming it was broken and awaiting repair. Suspicious and needing to use the facility, Stam decided to inspect it himself. What he discovered was horrifying fragments resembling human tissue blocking the pipes. Terrified, he immediately contacted the police. Responding to the report, officers arrived promptly and searched Crow's apartment. Inside, they found him calmly cooking a pot of potato stew, with steam filling the air. To their shock, they discovered a human hand among the ingredients. Further inspection revealed more body parts stored in the refrigerator, frozen and unidentifiable. Crow was arrested on the spot. Once in custody, he cooperated fully, calmly recounting the details of his crimes over the past 2 decades. He admitted to numerous attacks from 1955 to 1976, targeting women and children alike. During interrogation, Crow explained his method. He would seek out women walking alone, using his harmless appearance to approach them by asking for directions or help. After gaining their trust, he would lure them to isolated areas before committing the assaults. His typical methods involved strangulation or stabbing. Crow also confessed to consuming parts of his victims. Unlike others who might view such acts as rituals or trophies, Crow's motives were disturbingly pragmatic. When asked why, he explained that during Germany's economic downturn, inflation had made essential goods, especially meat, extremely expensive. He claimed his actions were driven purely by a desire to save money. Police found overwhelming evidence in Crow's apartment, including preserved remains matching his confessions. The case was irrefutably closed. To verify the accuracy of his confession, the police repeatedly brought Crow to the crime scenes around Duisburg and nearby areas, asking him to reenact his offenses. Throughout these reconstructions, Crow remained calm, showing no signs of remorse. His detailed cooperation provided law enforcement with irrefutable evidence, laying the groundwork for prosecution. Crow's trial took place in Duisburg, shocking German society with the brutality of his actions. The case was widely covered by the media and attracted significant public attention. He was charged with 8 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and multiple counts of assault. Some other incidents lacked sufficient evidence for formal charges. Despite his confessions, although Crow had admitted to his crimes, the trial faced challenges in evaluating his mental state and how it should influence sentencing. His defense team argued for leniency, citing his low IQ of just 76, comparable to that of a young child. They highlighted his immature behavior, claiming his limited understanding meant he could not fully grasp the consequences of his actions. Court-appointed psychiatrists assessed Crow and concluded that, beyond his intellectual limitations, he exhibited a dangerous personality. He was found to associate violent behavior with personal gratification, deriving satisfaction from the suffering of his victims. The defense argued that Crow should be placed in a psychiatric hospital rather than a prison, as his cognitive impairments and mental disorders hindered his ability to fully comprehend his actions. However, the prosecution countered that Crow was fully aware of his crimes. They pointed out his calculated approach, such as always carrying a knife and carefully selecting weaker victims, as evidence of clear intent. Despite his limited intelligence, the prosecution insisted that Crow understood his actions were wrong and must be held accountable. They demanded the highest possible sentence under German law. Public sentiment was intense, with crowds outside the courthouse even calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty for such a cold-blooded killer. After 151 days of trial, in October 1982, the Duisburg court found Crow guilty of 8 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment, the maximum penalty under German law at the time. The court rejected the defense's argument regarding his mental state, ruling that while Crow's cognitive abilities were impaired, he was still capable of understanding right from wrong and controlling his actions. Crow spent the remainder of his life in prison. Records describe him as a quiet and compliant inmate, showing no visible emotional reactions, seemingly resigned to his fate. In 1991, he died in prison from a heart attack, ending his life of crime. The story of Joakim Crow is not just a typical case of a serial offender, but also a reflection of the darker sides of human nature and the consequences of societal neglect. His life journey stretched from the ruins of World War II to Germany's post-war reconstruction, a period marked by poverty, instability, and broken family structures. During those harsh times, social outcasts like Crow were often ignored, receiving neither community support nor basic psychological care. From a lonely, abandoned childhood to an adulthood filled with hardship and pressure, he gradually transformed from a victim of society into a perpetrator of horrific crimes. His feelings of inferiority and bottled-up anger eventually manifested into acts of extreme violence against innocent people. Despite his IQ being only 76, the cruelty and cold-bloodedness he displayed were terrifying. His violent attacks and the way he desecrated his victims revealed a deeply disturbed mind. Crow's absurd justification, claiming he resorted to such acts due to economic hardship, reflected not only the lingering impact of post-war scarcity, but also his complete disregard for human life. Crow's case remains a significant subject in the fields of criminology and psychology. His complex mental state highlights the undeniable influence of social environment and personal experiences on criminal behavior. The legal proceedings against him also sparked widespread debate about how the justice system should assess the criminal responsibility of individuals with mental health issues. How should society balance punishment with psychological considerations in such cases? How do we distinguish between a depraved criminal and a deeply damaged victim of history and society? These are questions that still resonate today. What are your thoughts? Share your opinions in the comments below. Always stay alert and protect yourself. That's the end of today's video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Goodbye.